I never thought I'd be sitting here telling this story. 6 months ago, I was the family disappointment, the one everyone whispered about at Christmas dinner, the one who couldn't get their life together. And now, well, let me just start from the beginning. I was 28 years old, living in my childhood bedroom at my parents' house. I know how that sounds. Trust me, I heard it from everyone. My older sister Jennifer would roll her eyes every time I walked into a room. My brother Mark would make these little comments under his breath about how I needed to grow up and get my act together. But the worst part? My parents had started to believe them. See, I'd been struggling, really struggling. I'd graduated college with a degree in computer science, but the job market was brutal. I'd been laid off twice in 3 years through no fault of my own. The first time, the startup I worked for ran out of funding. The second time, they outsourced my entire department. I wasn't lazy. I wasn't incompetent. I was just unlucky, I guess. But try explaining that to your family when you're asking to move back home for the third time. I remember the night everything changed. It was a Tuesday in January, cold as hell outside, and I was in my room working on a freelance project, trying to scrape together enough money for groceries. My laptop was this ancient thing that took 5 minutes to boot up, but it was all I had. I could hear voices downstairs getting louder and louder. At first, I tried to ignore it. My family had been tense lately. Money was tight for everyone, not just me. Dad's construction business was slow during the winter months, and Mom had been talking about picking up extra shifts at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. But then I heard my name. "We can't keep enabling him," Jennifer's voice carried up the stairs. "He's 30 years old." 28, I muttered to myself, but I kept listening. "And he's still living in his childhood bedroom like he's in high school. It's embarrassing." "He's trying," Mom said, but her voice sounded tired. So tired. "Trying?" Mark laughed, but it wasn't a nice laugh. "Mom, he's been trying for 6 years. At what point do we admit that maybe he's just not cut out for the real world?" I felt my stomach drop. Not cut out for the real world. I'd been working since I was 15. I'd put myself through college. I'd had real jobs, real responsibilities. Just because I'd hit a rough patch didn't mean I was some kind of failure. "The house is worth more now than when we bought it," Jennifer continued. "If we're going to downsize anyway, this might be the perfect time. We could all use the money." "Where would he go?" Dad asked quietly. "That's not our problem anymore," Mark said. "He's an adult. He needs to figure it out." I sat there in the dark, my heart pounding. They were talking about selling the house I'd grown up in, the house where I'd learned to ride a bike in the driveway, where I'd had my first kiss on the front porch, where I'd spent countless hours helping Dad with repairs and renovations. But more than that, they were talking about me like I wasn't even human, like I was just this burden they needed to get rid of. I heard footsteps on the stairs, and I quickly pretended to be asleep, but I couldn't sleep. I lay there all night, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the biggest failure in the world. The next morning, I came downstairs to find them all sitting around the kitchen table with coffee and what looked like real estate papers. "Oh," Mom said when she saw me, "we were just discussing some things." "I heard," I said quietly. The silence was deafening. Jennifer looked uncomfortable. Mark just stared at his coffee. Dad cleared his throat. "Son, we think it might be time." "I know," I interrupted. "I get it. I'm a burden. I'm not cut out for the real world. You want to sell the house and move on with your lives?" "That's not what we said," Mom protested, but her voice was weak. "It's exactly what you said." I looked around the table at these people who were supposed to love me unconditionally. "How long do I have?" "The realtor thinks we could have it on the market by spring," Jennifer said, not meeting my eyes. "So maybe end of March?" 2 months. They were giving me 2 months to figure out my entire life. "Fine," I said. "But I want to ask you something. When you sell this house, when you split the money and move on with your lives, I want you to remember this conversation. I want you to remember that you looked at your son, your brother, when he was down, and instead of helping him up, you kicked him while he was there." I walked out of the kitchen, out of the house, and into the cold January morning. I had nowhere to go, no money, and no plan. But I had something else. I had anger, pure, burning anger. I drove to the public library because it was warm and had free internet. I spent the entire day there, applying for jobs, reaching out to contacts, doing everything I could think of. But I also started researching something else. I looked up the house, my childhood home, property records, tax assessments, recent sales in the neighborhood. The house was worth about $340,000. My parents had bought it for $89,000 back in 1995. They'd put some money into it over the years, but nothing major. It was a good house in a good neighborhood, and property values had gone up significantly. I started thinking about something my computer science professor had told us in college. He'd said that the tech industry was unpredictable, but there was always money to be made if you were willing to hustle and take risks. I'd been playing it safe for years, applying for traditional jobs, following the conventional path. But conventional wasn't working for me. Maybe it was time to try something else. I spent the next week doing research. I looked into every possible way to make money online: freelancing, e-commerce, affiliate marketing, cryptocurrency trading, app development. Most of it seemed like scams or get-rich-quick schemes. But one thing caught my attention: drop shipping. I'd heard of it before, but never really understood it. The basic idea was that you create an online store, find suppliers who will ship products directly to customers, and you never actually handle the inventory yourself. You just market the products and take a cut of the profits. It sounded almost too good to be true, but I found some legitimate success stories. People who had started with nothing and built six-figure businesses. The key was finding the right products and learning how to market them effectively. I had two things going for me. I understood technology, and I had nothing to lose. I used my last $500 to set up a basic e-commerce website. I chose a niche I knew something about: computer accessories and gadgets. I'd been building and fixing computers since I was 12, so I knew what people needed and what they were willing to pay for. The first week was brutal. I spent 18 hours a day learning about SEO, social media marketing, and customer service. I made every mistake you could possibly make. I set up payment processing wrong. I accidentally sent customers to broken links. I priced products so low I was losing money on every sale. But I kept going. Every day I got a little better. I started making sales. Not many, but enough to keep me motivated. I reinvested every penny back into the business. Better website design, more products, paid advertising. By the end of February, I was making about $2,000 a month. Not enough to move out, but enough to feel like maybe I wasn't a complete failure. My family didn't notice at first. They were too busy preparing for the house sale. Jennifer had found a condo she liked. Mark was looking at places closer to his job. Mom and Dad were planning to downsize to a smaller house across town. I kept working, kept growing the business. I was learning things I never thought I'd need to know: how to negotiate with suppliers, how to handle customer complaints, how to scale advertising campaigns, how to manage inventory and cash flow. In March, just as they were about to list the house, I hit my first $10,000 month. I'll never forget the moment I saw that number in my bank account. I was sitting in my childhood bedroom, the room they all thought I should be embarrassed about, and I was making more money than I'd ever made in my life. But I didn't tell them. I wanted to see how far I could push it. The house went on the market in April. I watched as strangers walk through my childhood home, imagining their own lives in these rooms. The realtor said they were getting a lot of interest. Properties in our neighborhood were selling fast. Meanwhile, my business was exploding. I'd figured out how to use social media advertising effectively. I'd found reliable suppliers who shipped quickly and had good customer service. I was making $15,000 a month, then $20,000, then $25,000. I was also working harder than I'd ever worked in my life. I was up at 5 a.m. every day, answering customer emails, updating product listings, analyzing sales data. I went to bed at midnight, exhausted but exhilarated. For the first time in years, I felt like I was building something real. The house sale was scheduled to close in June. The buyers were a young couple with a newborn baby. They seemed nice enough, but watching them plan their life in my childhood home was surreal. A week before the closing, I made a decision. I called the realtor. "Hi, this is about the house on Maple Street. I'm the son of the sellers. I was wondering if the buyers are still interested." or if they'd be open to backing out. That's an unusual question, the realtor said. Is there a problem with the sale? No, nothing like that. I was just curious about what would happen if someone else wanted to make an offer. Well, they're scheduled to close next week. They've already done their final walkthrough and secured financing. Unless something dramatic happens, the sale is going through. What if someone made a cash offer above asking price? There was a pause. That would be interesting, but it would have to be significantly above asking price to make it worth their while to walk away at this point. How much above asking price? Probably at least $50,000 over, maybe more. The asking price was $365,000, so I'd need to offer at least $400,000 to $15,000 to get their attention. I looked at my business bank account. I had $127,000 in cash. I'd been living like a monk for months, reinvesting everything back into the business except for basic expenses. I was making enough money now that I could probably get a loan for the rest. It was completely insane. I was thinking about buying my childhood home from my own family, but the more I thought about it, the more it felt like the right thing to do. I spent the weekend running numbers. I talked to a mortgage broker about getting a loan for the difference. I researched property management companies in case I wanted to rent it out. I looked into the tax implications of buying property. By Monday, I had a plan. I called the realtor back. I want to make an offer on the house, cash, $425,000. Are you serious? Dead serious. How quickly can we make this happen? I'll need to call the current buyers and see if they're willing to walk away. Then I'll need to call your parents and let them know. They'll probably want to know who's making the offer. Don't tell them it's me. Not yet. Just say it's a cash buyer who wants to close quickly. This is highly irregular. I know, but I'm serious about this. I have the money. The next 48 hours were chaos. The original buyers were upset, but they agreed to walk away for a $10,000 compensation fee. My parents were confused but excited about the higher offer. The realtor was scrambling to put together a new contract. I arranged for the cash through a combination of my business account and a short-term loan. I had to provide bank statements and proof of income, which was actually kind of satisfying. 6 months ago, I didn't have $500 to my name. Now I was making a cash offer on a $425,000 house. The closing was scheduled for Friday. I told my parents I'd be out of town for a few days visiting a friend. I didn't want to be around when they signed the papers. On Friday morning, I sat in the lawyer's office, signing document after document. The seller's attorney was there, representing my parents. He kept looking at me funny. "Have we met before?" he asked. "I don't think so," I said, keeping my head down. It wasn't technically a lie. I'd never met him before, but I had the feeling he'd seen me around the house during the sale process. The papers were signed. The money was transferred. I was handed a set of keys to my childhood home. I drove straight to the house. My parents' car was in the driveway. They were probably inside, packing up the last of their things. I sat in my car for a few minutes, trying to figure out what to say. How do you tell your family that you just bought the house they sold? How do you explain that you're not the failure they thought you were? I decided to just wing it. I walked up to the front door and used my key to unlock it. I could hear voices coming from the kitchen. "Hello," I called out. "Who's there?" Dad's voice called back. I walked into the kitchen. Mom, Dad, Jennifer, and Mark were all standing around boxes, looking confused and a little scared. "It's just me," I said. "What are you doing here?" Jennifer asked. "How did you get in?" I held up the keys. "I live here." "What are you talking about?" Mom asked. "We just sold the house. The new owners are supposed to take possession today." "I know," I said. "I'm the new owner." The silence was deafening. They all just stared at me like I'd grown a second head. "That's not possible," Mark said. "The buyer was some businessman who made a cash offer." "That's right," I said. "I'm a businessman. I made a cash offer." "You don't have that kind of money," Jennifer said, but her voice was uncertain. I pulled out my phone and showed them my business bank account. $127,000 in cash. Plus, I got a loan for the rest. "Where did you get this money?" Dad asked quietly. "I earned it. Over the past 6 months, I built a business, an e-commerce business. I'm making about $30,000 a month now." $30,000 a month? Mom whispered. Give or take. It depends on the season and how much I spend on advertising. They were all looking at me like I was speaking a foreign language. I don't understand, Jennifer said. You were broke 6 months ago. You couldn't even afford to move out. You're right, I was broke. I was desperate. I was exactly the failure you all thought I was. I looked around the kitchen at the faces of people who had written me off. But then you told me I was a burden. You told me I wasn't cut out for the real world. You decided to sell the house I grew up in rather than give me a chance to get back on my feet. We didn't mean it like that, Mom said, but her voice was shaking. Yes, you did. And you know what? You were right to kick me out, not because I was a failure, but because I needed to stop playing it safe. I needed to stop following the conventional path and start taking risks. I walked over to the kitchen table where I'd eaten breakfast every day for 18 years. I want you all to know something. I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful. If you hadn't given up on me, I never would have found out what I was capable of. I never would have pushed myself to build something real. So what happens now? Mark asked. Now you finish packing and move to your new places. And I live here, in my house. The house I bought with money I earned by being the person you said I could never be. But we're family, Mom said, and she was crying now. Yes, we are. And that's never going to change. But I needed you to see that I'm not a burden. I'm not someone who needs to be taken care of. I'm someone who can take care of himself and maybe even take care of others. I pulled out an envelope from my jacket pocket. What's that? Dad asked. A check for $50,000. I know your construction business has been struggling. I know Mom's been working extra shifts. I know money's been tight for everyone. I handed him the envelope. I don't want your money, he said, but he was staring at the envelope. It's not charity, Dad. It's an investment. I want to hire your construction company to renovate this house. New kitchen, new bathrooms, maybe an addition. I figure it'll take about 6 months and cost around $50,000. Are you interested? He looked at me for a long time. Then he looked at the envelope. Then he looked at Mom. You're serious about this, he said. Dead serious. I've got the money. You've got the skills. And I want to make this place into something special. What about us? Jennifer asked. What about our family? What about it? You'll come visit. We'll have dinner. We'll spend holidays together. The only difference is that now I'm the one hosting. I looked around the kitchen one more time. 6 months ago, you told me I was a burden. You were right. I was. But not because I was lazy or incompetent. I was a burden because I was scared. I was playing it safe, waiting for someone else to give me permission to succeed. I walked toward the front door, then turned back. You don't need anyone's permission to succeed. You just need to be willing to risk everything for something you believe in. And you need to be willing to prove everyone wrong. They finished packing that afternoon. I helped them load the boxes into their cars. It was awkward, but it was also kind of beautiful. For the first time in months, we were talking to each other like human beings instead of like problems that needed to be solved. That night, I sat in my empty house, my house, and called my business partner in China. We had a big product launch coming up, and I needed to finalize the details. How are things in America? He asked. Good, I said, looking around the empty living room. Really good. I just bought a house. Congratulations, business must be going well. It is, but you know what? The best part isn't the money. It's proving to myself that I could do it. After I hung up, I walked around the house room by room. My childhood bedroom, where I'd spent so many nights feeling like a failure. The kitchen, where my family had decided I was a burden. The living room where we'd watched TV together for years. It was strange being there alone, but it was also liberating. For the first time in my adult life, I was exactly where I wanted to be. I pulled out my laptop and started working on a new marketing campaign. I had a business to run, a house to renovate, and a future to build. 6 months later, I was standing in my completely renovated kitchen, hosting Thanksgiving dinner. Mom was helping me with the turkey. Dad was showing Mark the new cabinets he'd installed. Jennifer was playing with her kids in the living room. I have something to say, I announced as we all sat down to eat. Everyone looked at me expectantly. I want to thank you all for giving up on me. What? Mom asked. I'm serious. If you hadn't told me I was a burden, If you hadn't decided to sell the house, I never would have found the courage to bet on myself. I would have kept playing it safe, kept waiting for someone else to give me a chance. I looked around the table at my family. But I also want you to know that I forgive you, and I hope you can forgive me for being such a mess for so long. There's nothing to forgive, Dad said. We're proud of you. I know you are, but I'm not doing this for you anymore. I'm doing it for me, because I finally figured out who I am and what I'm capable of. Jennifer raised her glass. To second chances. To taking risks, Mark added. To family, Mom said. To proving everyone wrong, I said, especially yourself. We clinked glasses, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was exactly where I belong. You know, people always ask me what the secret was. How did I go from being broke and living in my childhood bedroom to making six figures and buying my own house in just 6 months? The truth is, there's no secret. There's no magic formula. There's just the willingness to risk everything when you have nothing left to lose. But here's what I learned. Sometimes the people who love you the most are the ones who hold you back the most. Not because they want to hurt you, but because they're afraid of seeing you fail. They'd rather see you play it safe and struggle than watch you take risks and potentially crash and burn. The problem is, if you never risk crashing and burn, you'll never know what you're truly capable of. I'm not saying you should burn bridges with your family. I'm not saying you should stop listening to advice from people who care about you. But I am saying that sometimes you need to trust yourself more than you trust other people's opinions about you. My family thought I was a burden because I was struggling. But I wasn't struggling because I was lazy or incompetent. I was struggling because I was trying to fit into a mold that wasn't made for me. Once I stopped trying to be the person everyone else wanted me to be and started being the person I actually was, everything changed. The business I built isn't just about money. It's about proving to myself that I can create something from nothing. It's about taking responsibility for my own success instead of waiting for someone else to give it to me. And the house isn't just about revenge or proving a point. It's about having a place that's truly mine. A place where I can build the life I want instead of the life other people think I should have. Today, my business is doing better than ever. I'm on track to make over $400,000 this year. I've hired 3 employees. I'm working on expanding into new markets. But more importantly, I wake up every morning excited about what I'm building. I'm not just going through the motions anymore. I'm not just trying to survive, I'm thriving. My family and I have a better relationship now than we've had in years. Not because I proved them wrong, but because I proved to myself that I was right all along. I wasn't a burden. I was just someone who needed to find his own way. And you know what? I think that's true for a lot of people. We get so focused on following the path that other people lay out for us that we forget to ask ourselves what path we actually want to be on. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having everyone give up on you, because that's when you finally have the freedom to discover who you really are. So if you're in a place right now where everyone thinks you're a failure, where everyone has written you off, where everyone sees you as a burden, good, use that. Let it fuel you. Let it motivate you to prove them wrong. But more importantly, let it motivate you to prove yourself right. Because at the end of the day, the only person's opinion that really matters is your own. And if you can look in the mirror and say, I'm proud of who I'm becoming, then it doesn't matter what anyone else thinks. I'm sitting here in my house, in my kitchen, in the place where I was once told I didn't belong, and I'm not angry anymore. I'm grateful, because being told I was a burden was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to become the person I was always meant to be.